Museum has partnered with Fannie for the past several years, starting off with very small projects and growing into much bigger ones. And the Center for Arts Education Leadership Grant has allowed us to continue the important work of transforming teaching practice and student learning.
One of the things we think is important about the program is that it allows the teachers several opportunities actually. One is to incorporate art into their classrooms and to work with a teaching artist to do that. And secondly, it, I think, helps the children, the students, work with art materials that they haven't been exposed to before. And then it gives the teachers, the student, and the teaching artist a chance to talk about and experiment with ideas that are expressed visually. And then there's some carryover from those visual expressions into written expression. So we find that that also supports literacy development for students.
The comic unit was the most complex and layered project we'd taken on thus far. For the comic project, the students had to have a really strong historical understanding of what happened in each of their countries in terms of the revolution. With that understanding, the students could then demonstrate the revolution through a visual narrative.
We focused on, as a school, Haiti, Mexico, Dominican Republic, Cuba, Venezuela, Chile, and Nicaragua. We explored education, government, religion, family in some places. So we had these like three categories: problematic power, resistance, shift in power. But we understood that in each place it wasn't like a clear and linear thing. It was a cycle, and one thing didn't necessarily always lead to another.
Even though it's art and we're having fun, we're also learning about different things.
In terms of artistic concepts, the students focused on symbolism, both through color and motif, focal point, composition, line quality, and color and inking skills.
This art project does a lot because my group, we came together and we did a very good job at it. And we all got to put our own ideas into our art pieces. Our art pieces basically speaking for us, so everything that we had to say, we just said through our art pieces.
This project helped a great deal with students who are more visually literate as opposed to orally literate, or literate in terms of their writing. I think that when students sketched out their ideas on cells, it actually helped them think about their revolution in the sense of a narrative, a story to be told. And it was easier for them to break down the steps and construct it logically once they can see it laid out in front of them, which is how I think a lot of our students think, is visually.
The fall project began with a lecture on the history of comics. From there, the students began to do research, which was both a collaborative process and an independent one. Working collaboratively with their peers, the students had to figure out a visual narrative for their comic. Once the narrative had been decided upon, the students traced out their imagery, layering together multiple pieces to create their own unique composition.
The Studio Museum in Harlem is a contemporary art museum that focuses on the work of artists of African descent. Since its inception, the museum has strongly believed in the arts as a tool for learning. An important part of the collaboration this year was for the students to visit the Studio Museum to see the Africa Comics exhibition. Africa Comics is an exhibition that showcases the work of comic artists from Africa dealing in issues that range from genocide to poverty to revolution. And it's crucial for the students to come in and see this work as they're working on their projects in the classroom, so they can visualize how artists communicate and tell these very difficult stories through this medium, and then come back to the classroom and tie it together with what they're trying to say in their story.
The trip to the museum really allowed the students to make connections between the African comics and the comics they were making in their own classrooms. They really learned how to read images and really understand what they were making and see how an image could tell a whole story.
Some of the students chose to add a motif to their comic. The motif would represent symbolically the main theme that they were trying to convey. Once their motif was designed, the students transferred the imagery into a pattern onto the background. The pattern could either be within the border of the comic or somewhere within the main composition. The next step was for the students to ink their comic. The inking was done with pens that had various thicknesses. That way the students could emphasize their focal point by using a thicker pen.
A lot of the kids sometimes had struggles with the concept of revolution, and I feel like the cartoon allows them to sort of simplify a little bit and really identify what is the story, and then what are the blocks of that story in terms of problem, resistance, shift in power.
Throughout the course of the project, I had individual critiques with the students. The final step of the project was adding color to the comic. The colors were decided individually by the students and then collectively by the group. For this stage of the project, we provided both colored pencils and professional comic markers. The students worked with symbolic color as opposed to representational color. The goal was to use the color to emphasize the focal point, which in turn would reflect the main theme of their comic. After the students added color, gallery walks were set up by each of the teachers. The exhibitions were set up both inside the classroom and outside in the school's hallways. The students critiqued the artwork by relying on the visual imagery as well as the artist's statements.